Merlin, Season 6, Episode 4. After Camlann. Leon hurried toward the lower town looking for Gwen. No one had seen her since early morning and she couldn't be found. As he approached the gates, he saw her leading a wounded knight on a horse. The man was conscious but obviously hurt. His face was hidden by his hood. Gwen was wearing breeches and a fur jacket over her tunic. "My lady, I have been looking all over for you," Leon said, hurrying through the crowds towards her. "Leon?" asked the injured man as he tried to sit up on his horse. "Uncle Robin?" Leon asked, going to his side. Robin fell forward onto his horse, unconscious, as Leon steadied him. "What happened?" Leon asked as Gwen reined in the horse, moving out of the way of a cart carrying more wounded to the infirmary. "He was ambushed returning to Camelot. The rest of his patrol was killed. Robin was badly wounded," Gwen said, pointing to the blood on his side. "He can't die," Leon said, his voice barely heard in the noisy street. "We need to get him to Gaius," Gwen said, leading the horse gently on toward the citadel. "Yes, of course," he said, moving to his uncle's side to make sure he didn't fall from the horse. "Has there been news of Arthur?" she asked. "Still no word. More patrols have been coming in, but there has been no word of Arthur or Merlin. The sorcerer that drove the Saxons back has also not been seen, though many wish to thank him for his help," Leon replied. "I think we owe him far more than we know," Gwen said, looking around the courtyard in dismay. There were many covered bodies on the plaza outside the palace. The count seemed to have doubled since she had rode out to the lower town earlier that morning. As they approached the infirmary, 4 knights helped Leon carry his uncle inside on a stretcher. They laid him gently on a bed near the door. Gwen grabbed a quiver full of arrows tied to the horse and then followed them into the infirmary. She looked around for Gaius and noticed that the room was almost full. There were several covered bodies to one side of the room, and many of the patients were unconscious. Gaius looked up from treating Sir Vidor as Gwen approached. "My lady," Gaius said. Sir Vidor tried to stand but stumbled. Gwen and Gaius helped him to sit back on the bed. "You must rest, Vidor," Gaius said, helping the knight to lie back down. He moved away from the bed to talk to Gwen. "How is he?" she asked, full of concern. "It doesn't look good, my lady," Gaius replied, looking around to make sure they were not overheard. Gwen looked back at Sir Vidor lying on the bed. He looked far too pale, and his skin was shiny and stretched, though there was no fever. "Those injured by sword and spear I can mostly heal, but I fear the arrows were poisoned. Sir Vidor was hit by such an arrow, and although his armor turned it, the tip pierced his skin. It was just a scratch, but I do not think he will survive." "Can't you treat him?" she asked, looking around the room at others with the same pale complexion. "I have tried all I know. Like the others, he will eventually fall into unconsciousness, then die," Gaius said, indicating the covered bodies on one side of the room. "From a scratch?" she asked. "The poison is deadly. I can't make an antidote as I have been unable to identify it," he said. "These might help," Gwen said, passing the quiver of arrows to Gaius. "Where did you get these?" he asked, looking at them closely. "Sir Robin will tell you the story when he wakes, but I believe these arrows have been dipped in the poison," she said as they made their way across the room to where Leon waited with Sir Robin. "Where have you been?" Gaius asked, looking at Gwen in the way she was dressed. "I have been helping in the lower town all morning. There are many wagons arriving with the wounded from Camlann," she replied, looking down at her dirty clothes. "Sir Robin?" Gaius asked, looking at the unconscious man on the bed before him. Gwen showed Gaius the wound on Robin's side. It was deep and swollen, but the bleeding had stopped. "Can you help him, Gaius?" Leon asked. "I will do what I can," he said. He passed the quiver of arrows back to Gwen, then carefully inspected the wound. "He can't die, Gaius. When my father became ill, Robin took me under his wing. He is the reason I became a knight. He taught me everything I know," Leon said, looking at his uncle's pale face. "This wound was made by a sword," Gaius said, looking relieved. "He's lost a lot of blood, but he should recover with some rest." Gaius cleaned the wound and applied a poultice. "What of all the others?" Gwen asked, looking at the covered beds at the far side of the room. Gaius moved away from the bed and talked quietly so just Leon and Gwen could hear him. "Many died of wounds they received in the battle, but there are some that have been hit with poison arrows. Most of these are patrols returning from Camlann or those out looking for Morgana's men. I have not yet been able to identify the poison. If it gets into the bloodstream, even just a scratch can kill. They fall into unconsciousness, then die." "Will they help you to identify it?" Leon asked, looking at the arrows Gwen was holding. Having an uncontaminated source is going to help, but I have no time to study. More and more are being brought in, and I'm needed here, he said. I'll help here. I've assisted you enough to know how to dress wounds, Gwen said, passing the quiver back to Gaius and rolling up her sleeves. You are now queen, my lady, Leon said, looking at her. I can't sit by and do nothing, not when so many are suffering and dying, Leon. I can't find a cure for the poison, but I can help here so Gaius can, she said. Leon? Robin asked, trying to sit up. Leon hurried to his uncle's side and Gaius poured some potion into a cup. Here, drink this, Gaius said, putting the cup to Robin's mouth. Leon held his head up so he could drink. The potion revived him a little so he was able to sit up unaided. He noticed Gwen standing next to Leon looking at him with concern. Your Highness, he said, trying to stand. Sit down, Robin, and I've told you before you can still call me Gwen, she said, smiling at him. I've known you since I was a child. Now tell them what you told me of the attack on your patrol. Very well, Gwen, he said, as he sat back on the bed and looked down at the bandage covering his wound. What happened to you? Leon asked. Where did you get these? Gaius asked, holding out the quiver of arrows. Robin shifted on the bed to get comfortable, then sighed as he looked up at them. I was part of the garrison that remained at Camlann looking after the injured and burying the dead. We were traveling back to Camelot with 8 wounded soldiers who had recovered enough to travel. There were 3 others knights with me, and the injured were traveling in a covered wagon. We set up camp, and Sirs Gilbert, Audric, and Cigar were attending the horses and the wounded, while I went to gather firewood. They were attacked by many archers who fired arrows from the trees. I heard the yells and returned to the camp. I managed to surprise one of them and forced him to fight. I killed him, but he injured me. Audric hit one of them with his own arrow. We heard him cry out, but he managed to get away. The rest fled, even though they outnumbered us and could have easily finished us. Robin groaned and put his hand to his side. Perhaps they saw or heard something. Was there no other patrol in the area? Leon asked. Not that we saw or heard. Sir Gilbert and 5 of the wounded men were killed outright in the attack. The other 3 soldiers were all injured. They were not wearing any armor, and the attackers had fired many arrows. Cigar had been hit in the leg, and the wound was deep and ragged. Audric had been luckier, or so we thought. He had been hit in the shoulder, but his armor had turned it. He had a nasty scratch, but was otherwise unharmed. I retrieved the dead man's quiver as we noticed the arrows had a shiny coating and a strange smell. We buried the dead and continued towards Camelot, but the next morning Sir Cigar and the rest of the soldiers were dead. Their wounds had been deep, but they were not deadly. Leon and Gwen looked at Gaius, then back at Robin. We buried them and continued on our way, but Audric's wound would not stop bleeding. I'm not a physician, but I know enough to dress a battle wound. Nothing helped. Sir Audric died just outside the town gates, said Robin, lying back on the pillows. Who were these men? Gaius asked, looking at the arrows. He could smell the poison and had noticed the shiny residue on many of the wounds. At first we thought they were remnants of Morgana's army, but looking closely at the one I killed, I believe they were Lot's men, Robin said. Lot's men? Leon asked. Yes, they were dressed similar to the Saxons, but their bows were smaller and heavier than the ones the Saxons use. The arrows, too, are shorter and thicker. As far as I know, these are only made by the craftsmen of Essetir, he said, looking at the arrows Gaius was holding. What were Lot's men doing within Camelot's border? Gwen asked, looking at Leon. News of the battle would have reached Lot by now, and although we won, he will know our forces are scattered and that the king has not returned, Leon said. Lot has long wanted the throne of Camelot. He may be planning an attack and using these poison arrows on our patrols to weaken us even further, Gaius said. Gaius, you must try to find out what this poison is. I will remain here and help for a while, Gwen said. As you wish, my lady, Gaius said, bowing to Gwen and leaving to go to his chambers, taking the arrows with him. Gather as much news as you can and prepare the defenses. I will address the knights first thing in the morning. If Lot is preparing for war, then we must be ready, she said to Leon. I'll go with you, Robin said, getting up from his bed. You will rest for now. You can join us in the morning if Gaius thinks you are well enough, Gwen said, helping Robin back to the bed. Leon, make sure word is sent to the garrison, guarding the injured at Camlann. They must be warned of the attack on your uncle. My lady, said Leon, bowing his head. He squeezed his uncle's shoulder gently, then hurried from the room. Let's meet for the fifth episode.